over division.
Trump, take note. This is what democracy looks like.
Mark Carney is the leader of Canada and what the world needs right now.
Someone that's ready to stand strong against Trump and defend democracy.
Tonight, Canada sent a message. Tyranny doesn't win here. Fear doesn't win here. Division doesn't win here.
Canada just proved it to the world. We chose strength. We chose unity. We chose each other.
We're proud, we're hopeful, and we're just getting started.
Are you happy with the results? Woohoo!
Welcome to the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Guy. The steps are now underway. Secession is not a whisper anymore, thanks to the ignorance of the central cabal and the appointment of a continuation of the complete breakdown of Canada. This episode will be on Alberta. And I can tell you right now, they already had enough votes the last time they had a referendum in order to get a referendum going for secession. The social media platforms are ablaze. Members are joining at record rates. This goes for the Saskatchewan separation and succession movements as well as the Alberta movements. But Alberta, especially since they already have the majority of the they're ready. The legislation is there. All they need to do is vote on whether or not they have enough population to put a referendum into place. That all changed this morning. Here it is.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to be here with Mickey Amory, Alberta's Minister of Justice, to announce changes to the way our elections work in the province. I believe democracy thrives when people trust the process. They need to know that they can take part in a simple and easily accessible process. They need to be confident in and to trust the election results. And they need to know where financial support for candidates and parties comes from. So we are introducing Bill 54, which is the Election Statutes Amendment Act, to make elections at every level in Alberta more transparent and democratic. If passed, the use of electronic tabulators and other automated voting machines would be eliminated, requiring all ballots to be counted by hand to protect election integrity. The unofficial vote counts will be required to be complete within 12 hours of polls closing to provide timely, reliable results, ensuring Albertans receive fast and accurate election results. The practice of vouching at voting stations, where a voter without identification could simply have their identity vouched for and verified by another eligible voter, will end. Our government has made a commitment to restore public confidence in identification and voter eligibility verification processes through the elimination of vouching. We are expanding access to special ballots to improve voting accessibility and to protect voter privacy. These changes would allow any voter to request a special ballot without needing to provide a reason, and allow special ballots to be sent overseas or to remote locations earlier. And we're protecting integrity by requiring voters to personally request their special ballot. Voters will also be required to vote in their constituency of residence or by special ballot. These changes will ensure that all Albertans have ample opportunity to have their say at election time, and that Alberta's elections are open, secure, and accessible. We are expanding opportunities for Albertans to be involved in direct democracy by making changes to the threshold needed for successful citizens' initiatives. The signature collection time for citizens' initiatives will be extended from 90 days to 120 days. We are also improving the process by setting the threshold to be 10% of the number of eligible voters who participated in the last general election, as opposed to being either 10 or 20% of total registered voters. Additional amendments will update rules to make it easier for Albertans to hold their elected officials accountable through MLA recall. These changes would extend the recall signature collection time from 60 days to 90 days and lower the signature threshold to be 60% of the total number of electors who voted in the electoral district in the most recent election, as opposed to 40% of the total number of electors in the riding. Recall legislation and citizens' initiatives give Albertans more ways to be directly involved in democracy and to have their say on issues that matter to them. There are many more changes in the proposed bill, and Minister Mickey Amery will provide more details about exactly what they cover. But our intent is clear. Democracy is the foundation of our freedoms and the source of legitimacy for governments at every level. It must be protected, strengthened, and defended, and that's exactly what we are doing. We want to make it simple as possible for every Albertan to express their political views and safeguard the system that enables them to do it. These changes build on the integrity, trust, and openness that have always been at the heart of democracy and keep Alberta strong and free. And with that, I would like to ask Minister Amery to take over.
She has just dropped the number of citizens that it takes in order to petition for a referendum. Now, Carney, who got booted by Albertans because he was incompetent, had set the margin of error way too high. It was impossible to do, especially in the time frame. And with the digital age, it makes it really hard to combine signed signatures with somebody walking around with a petition to put them on electronically, which counts as two petitions, and then there's legal arguments towards it, which is where we're at right now, why a lot of petitions fail. As well as the fact as, which I'm going to discuss on this show, how ignorance and greed and chasing popularity ruins the cause. Now, we saw this years ago when the separation was exploding. 73% of those in Alberta, 77% of those in Saskatchewan, and at that time, I believe it was 67% of Quebecers were for separation, secession, independence. The problem is all these different people were creating different pages and groups, which pulled numbers away from a central group. In doing so, it was chaos. There were 30 different petitions going, so some would only have 10,000, some would have 50,000, some would have 100,000. Alberta, I believe, hit 177,000 on their largest, but when I was doing the math back then, looking at the numbers, I started to add up all of the other groups, and if everybody would have coalesced, would have combined and joined into one group, there was well over 350,000 signatures. The actual base itself divided itself to conquer itself. Now, I'm not even going to go there. There are, to my knowledge, from what I've seen, 9 pretty big groups. But one of them has been doing this for years. One of them has got a complete platform and already has enough members. I believe they're around 1 million. We'll confirm that in a video I'm going to show you a little bit later, which could pretty much succeed in succession. With the changes that Danielle has put through today, which should have been done by Carney, but he didn't want to because he's an ignoramus, this gives the ability not only for the people to petition the government to change laws or to start to engage in a political or a argumentative fight against new legislation being discussed or legislation that was put in. So just dealing with the fundamentals of the province, being a private police force or the pension plan or whatever. The people now have an actual democracy where enough people can start the conversation, and given enough time to build and get the word out so that people who have no idea what's even going on can then see it and go, oh my, that's a brilliant idea, or no, not interested. I'm going to finish off with a few more cuts from this presser she had. And then we're going to get real serious, real deep. And I urge you to like, share, and subscribe. And if you are from Alberta or Saskatchewan, well, from Saskatchewan, take note. Because these people are there. Alberta's ready. They're just waiting for the opportune time. And with Carney and the, I'm going to call it what it is, the illegal appointation, the undemocratic process in which they brought him in, the devious and, well, evil that the Liberal Party is and has forced upon Canadian citizens. And now if those out east are too blind to see it, that's their fault. But the West is done. They're done. Let's dive a little deeper into her presser. And then, like I said, we're going deep.
Well, without interference from the Legislative Assembly. I hope that helps answer your question.
But without a referendum.
Well, no, with the
with the
referendum.
referendum.
With the referendum, we just eliminate,
Removes the requirement for referendum.
removes the legislative step, the legislative. Let's, as a for instance, I've agreed with Quebec that we should be able to appoint judges at the provincial level. I think that might be, I don't know if that is a constitutional requirement. That might require a constitutional amendment. And so if it is the case that we have the premiers get together and identify a number of constitutional changes that we think would benefit us, being able to put those directly to the people would be the kind of thing to do, as opposed to waiting for the legislative session. Because as you know, we only sit 3 months in the spring and 1 month in the fall, and that just gives more flexibility to take an issue and put it directly to the people for affirmation.
Gotcha. I'm going to go to Shay and then Catherine. I'll either come to the phones or to you guys.
Yeah, just following up on some of my colleagues' questions, the word referendum mentioned several times throughout this legislation. Just wondering, into the Premier, those 9 demands that you outlined, I think within 6 months you said you wanted to see some action on them. What if you don't see that action? What then? And is the door open to a referendum on separation?
Well, I live in hope. I mean, the very first conversation I had with Justin Trudeau when I got elected was to talk about how we could align around a reasonable timeline for an emissions reduction target that wouldn't devastate our industry. And my very first conversation with Prime Minister Carney was the same thing. And I'm going to have a renewed conversation with him about that. And so he's given the impression, certainly with the interactions he's had with me and the Council of the Federation, that he is open to establishing economic corridors that include pipelines. And I have to believe that if you're intending to create more markets, build more pipelines, you will need to have oil and gas to fill them. So you cannot have policy that suppresses the development of resources at the same time as you're trying to expand the development of resources. So we'll have a very interesting conversation over the next 6 months. I don't want to prejudge the outcome, but that's what we'll be advocating for.
This morning's statement, I mean, you're talking about hope and optimism in your answer just now, but this morning there was words like hostile and protecting the province. I guess how optimistic are you about the relationship with the new Prime Minister? Are you feeling hopeful that this could be a new relationship between Alberta and Ottawa?
Well, it very much depends. I mean, we had a cabinet that he went into the election with that was exactly the same as the cabinet that subjected Alberta to 10 years of economic devastation. So whether or not he, as a leader, is going to be able to change course remains to be seen. He's given some undertakings, but he said different things in different forms to different people in different parts of the country. So I don't know the answer yet. I made it very clear what I think he needs to do to reset the relationship with Alberta. I think what we put on the table is very reasonable and very much in sync with the idea of being an energy superpower and finding new markets. And I guess the ball will be in his court to see how he responds to that.
Thanks. And Catherine?
Yeah, so the legislation very specifically mentions the Alberta Taxpayer Protection Act when we're talking about that exemption of the requirement of the legislature. What kind of questions are
We're going to skip ahead a little bit here.
Rahim Mohammed with Post Media.
Hello, this question's for the Premier. Madam Premier, do you agree with some of your fellow Conservatives that Premier Doug Ford and Corey Tenike are at least somewhat to blame for the Conservatives falling short in last night's election, given their multiple unsolicited interjections during the campaign?
All I can tell you is I tried to keep myself out of the federal election. I know the media kept on trying to draw me in. I felt that this was an important contest for the leaders of the federal parties to fight out, and they did. I have a relationship with Ontario Premier Doug Ford that is very constructive at the Council of the Federation, and I'm hoping that that continues.
Now, about the Doug Ford issue, he better watch out. There are a lot of very good independent journalists who are digging. I have got 2 folders on him myself, which, doing the research on my own with very limited help from others, is hard to be able to put out an episode at least once or twice a day to keep everybody updated and be able to build multiple files. It's difficult to do. But what I can tell you is I've already found a lot of evidence that by the time I'm done building the file should be enough to more than likely warrant an investigation. The man is a liberal. If anything was to prove it, it's the point that the insufferable damage that the Liberals have done to Ontario, and then bolstering support through the auto industry in a fake business scheme of these auto sector EV outlets, expansions, and brand new buildings that are all going tits up in a handbasket. There's companies involved, there's people involved that show a very high ring of culpability. And if I keep going the way it's looking, shows there are a lot of dirty backdoor dealings going on. Right to the Greenbelt, to the whole legalization of online gambling and some other things. Now, I've already thrown a bone to a few different people out there, hoping they will take up the load off of my shoulders because I've got so much to work on, especially with this ballot that I found out, which, by the way, I'll be doing an episode on that. This goes even deeper. What they're doing is right out of the Nazi handbook, which in the future became known as MK Ultra. Like I said, future episodes. Back to Ford. Ford didn't want a conservative government in who was going to allow for open businesses to access the Ring of Fire and other building projects. He likes the way it's being done because there's a lot of backdoor dealings. This is all going to come out. Like I said, there's some very good independents that are really pissed right now, and they are starting to focus on Dougie. The kicker to Ontario is you got people like Sloan, who's a real conservative and wants to bust the corruption. And Dougie purposely called an election to try and stop any alternative conservative movement from not only exposing him, but from taking seats and getting into Parliament, which would then completely destroy Ontario's supposedly conservative government. They're not conservative. Now, let's get back to Danielle Smith and Dougie. All eyes are focused on you. You blew it. And you ruined Canada. You are part and parcel of why this is all happening.
Just a quick follow-up. Does a Liberal victory with the Liberal track record on resource issues and Alberta-Ottawa relations, does that increase the prospect of you calling an early election either sometime before the end of the calendar year or in 2026?
Well, I still have a 2.5-year mandate. Minority governments don't tend to last very long. So it may well be that we're already into an election before I face re-election. So I don't really see any reason to go to an early election.
Oh my God. Refreshing to have a real leader.
Thanks, Raheem. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Rick Bell with Post Media.
Good afternoon, Premier. A real simple question. I realize you're not advocating for Alberta separation, separatism, independence, or anything like that, but what is your reaction to the fact that the level of frustration among many Albertans has gotten so strong that some people are at least talking about, thinking about, pondering, debating an option such as leaving Canada? Well, what is your reaction to that?
Well, I think Albertans are hurt and betrayed. That's how I think Albertans are feeling. I think Canada as a whole got a sense of that feeling of hurt and betrayal with the way the Americans are treating us right now. But we've been treated that way for the last 10 years. Treated like our interests don't matter. Treated like our economic imperatives aren't important. Treated like we should be just shut up and just be satisfied with whatever the central government decides to do, regardless of whether it's constitutional or not. I think that's what you were seeing in this last election. And I think Albertans want to share my view that we want to be able to have Alberta sovereignty within a united Canada. But we also would like to see Team Canada be on Team Alberta for once. And that's what, when I say I live in hope that that's going to happen, it hasn't happened for the last 10 years. And so that's part of the reason why I think Albertans are frustrated. I think that they were hoping for a big change, and they didn't get it last night. So I'm going to do what I can to work with the current government, as I always have, to find areas of common agreement and to try to address those things that have been causing some of that feeling of betrayal and hurt. And hopefully we'll be able to forge a stronger approach with our fellow premiers, and a recognition from the federal government that they've got to honor the Constitution.
And my follow-up question is, there's already, I guess, an article popped up just as you were speaking about the Bloc Québécois offering to help Carney to stay in office, provided he does certain things, one of which would be, of course, not talking about pipelines going through Quebec as an example. So my question is, how do you feel about the prospect that the Bloc Québécois could, on many issues, prop up the Carney government if it turns out that they are in fact a minority?
Well, I guess the Prime Minister has a choice to make then, because that's not what he got elected on. He got elected on ensuring that we had economic corridors that would be able to get all of our products to market, including oil and gas. And so that's what I would expect to work with the Prime Minister on, and I would expect all the premiers to as well. Let's remember, the Bloc Québécois wants to break the country up. They want to destroy Canada. And so it doesn't surprise me that the opening position of the Bloc leader is to take a position that would be destructive to Canadian unity. So I don't think that Prime Minister Carney should play that game. I think that he should look at the mandate that he got as one to work with the premiers on the communique that we signed before going into the election.
Now, This is what the reporter is talking about. And it was a big mistake, a very big mistake for the Bloc to do.
The fact that there's no future for oil and gas, at least in Quebec and probably everywhere, and this has to be said and protected. I have a brand new weapon to do that. Mr. Bonin will be extraordinary carrying that message.
Now, as I've stated before on previous episodes, and I urge you, especially if you're a new viewer, and even if you're a subscriber already and you haven't, I urge you to go through and watch all my videos. I'm sure you'll be enlightened. The Laurentian elite have controlled Canada for a long time through that little 3% geographic coverage they have against 97% of Canada. They've been making huge amounts of money off of blood oil for generations. In fact, Trudeau's dad's grandpa was really big into that. And they've been saying the same thing to the West for generations. That there's no reason, there's no timeline, it's not worth the cost. And now the newest one, the world doesn't need it because we're going to transition to this new battery life, which is already being proven around the world to be failing. And by the way, from the reports I've been getting today, Europe is in huge trouble with their electricity grid. They're already running coal plants that they had shut down. They're having surges and are looking to try to stop the largest blackout in the history of Europe as we speak. This man's funders and donors don't want Western oil and gas because it'll cut into their profit margin. You see, these people don't want you to make good money. They want low income, controllable, intergenerational low income, while they live in their penthouses, snobbishly looking down at their peasants, and hold these type of people in power. At the time, I don't know if Danielle Smith was aware of this. I don't think so, because looking at the timeline of when this happened, it literally happened about an hour before her press that we're looking at right now. So she is going to be aware of it, which I know they already know about. Quebec has allowed themselves to be the most negative, divisive, and destructive piece of Canada. They are, at a minimum, 75% responsible for the suppression and degradation that the West has been feeling for generations. This is just feeding more fuel on the fire. And this little clip has gone viral. And it's a lot of people in Alberta and Saskatchewan and northern BC, by the way. A lot of northern BC, especially the indigenous, want out. They've got a taste of what energy can give them without corporate and government control. They are having money to bring back their culture, their language, build roads, build schools, upgrade infrastructure, have complete satellite communication, no more waiting on the government, no more little checks while they step on the foots step on their heads, I should say, holding them down, buying them off with little $100 raises every few years just before an election. Once you realize the money that can be made by freeing yourself from the government and the elite, suddenly the democratic wheels get lubed, topped up with air, and prosperity gets better and better and better. We'll go back to Danielle Smiths. This is an amazing leader.
Thank you. And we have time for one, maybe two more questions. We'll go to global and then, yeah.
When it comes to the legislation and the discussion about referendums, I'm just wondering if you're hoping this does make it easier to put that question towards Albertans about the Sovereignty Act, seeing Alberta separate. Is that the goal here?
When we were talking about looking at the thresholds for both recall and citizen initiative, one of the reasons why we were discussing about changing it is that you want a bar that's high, but you don't want a bar that's impossible to achieve. And we saw with some of the recall initiatives that took place at the municipal level, the bar was impossible to achieve. So we wanted to try to create something that was a little bit more reasonable. And the fact that we haven't seen any citizen-initiated referendum, that also suggested to us that people just thought it was pointless to try to go out and try to get that many signatures. And so we wanted to recalibrate to be able to allow for voters to express an interest. If you've got 10% of your voting public that is concerned about an issue, it's something we should know about. So I don't want to prejudge what kind of issues might come forward. If you look at California, they regularly have propositions. They have 10 or 15 propositions virtually every election campaign. And ultimately, that's what I'd like to get to. I'd like to see a lot more citizen-initiated referenda on issues of importance.
And just following up from a question earlier too, I just want to ask, or directly, is the door still open to Alberta separating? That I feel that question wasn't directly answered.
Well, not by me. I believe in Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada. However, there is a citizen-initiated referenda process that if citizens want to put a question on a ballot and get enough of their fellow citizens to sign that petition, then those questions will be put forward. Again, I don't want to prejudge what a question might be, but not by our government.
Thank you. And Janet, did you still have a question?
Yes,
then we'll go to you for our last question.
Okay. You said in March that Alberta would no longer tolerate, those words you used, the treatment from the federal Liberals. So I don't think I have a clear sense of what does not tolerating it look like now.
Well, there's a couple of things it looks like. We have passed a couple of different motions under our Alberta sovereignty within a United Canada legislation. Very soon, if they do not repeal their net zero power regs, we're going to have to do a call for natural gas power plants to be built in this province so we don't end up in the dark. And so that would be one way that we are just going to say we're not listening to we don't recognize your authority to tell us that we cannot provide reliable power to our people. The other area, of course, was with our emissions legislation. We've made our oil and gas sites critical infrastructure that federal agents cannot go onto without permission. We have taken ownership of emissions data, so the emissions data will be reported to us. And if we have to take more measures to ensure that we retain ownership of our oil and gas so we can actually get it to market, we will. So those are the things that we intend to do. We're going to assert our right under the Constitution to develop our resources, develop our electricity grid for the benefit of Albertans.
So when it comes to the way you've been having diplomatic relations with the U.S., some people might say it's been a unique approach compared to the federal government and the rest of Canada. So how does this election result change the kind of diplomatic approach you're going to be taking with the U.S.?
We've been wanting to have a constructive relationship with the U.S. Keep in mind that virtually all of our oil and gas go to the United States because our neighbors wouldn't let us build pipelines east and west. Let's remember the reality of what we're facing in our country. But also let's demonstrate that with the construction of Trans Mountain and the Coastal GasLink, that has changed a lot for our province, which says to me we need a lot more of it. And so I would say we're going to be looking at the potential to build pipelines south, east, west, and north. And we will see if we're going to meet with a supportive partner at the federal level. The Prime Minister made a lot of supportive comments prior to the election, during the election, and now we'll see whether or not that is the case after the election. But we would, our preference would be for us to provide energy security to Canada first and make sure that we're building pipelines across the country so that Quebec and Ontario don't have to rely on all their energy coming up from America or coming from overseas. Our priority would be to also help our friends in Asia. We have a real advantage, having just come back from Japan and South Korea. We have a real advantage by having pipelines now open up to the West Coast. The Americans don't have that. Americans don't have the ability to serve the Pacific the way we do. If you have to get oil and gas from the Gulf Coast, it takes 55 days to get to Japan. It only takes 8 days to get from Canada. So why don't we take advantage of that opportunity, double down and do more of it? So those are the kind of things that I'll be looking at. And if there is an opportunity as well, once relationship with the United States normalizes with the renegotiated Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, we would be open to having conversations with the United States about expanding more pipeline access down south as well.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have for questions today.
Thanks, everyone.
Now, before we get really deep, for all of those northern areas, Saskatchewan, Manitoba especially, who jumped on the socialist bandwagon, the free check bandwagon, you're going against the chiefs who are trying to get projects built like they did in BC to remove the Indigenous off of the dependency, the socialized forced impoverished checks that have been holding their people back and causing major amounts of strain on the people. There's a project that's been trying to get going up in Hudson's Bay. This would bring incredible wealth to everybody along that pipeline all the way there. You're voting yourself into poverty. You're voting yourself into fascism. And another good note, previous episodes I brought this up as well. If Trudeau would have actually built the pipelines that were already on his desk before he swept everything off and threw his little battery on there that froze and didn't work anymore, we could have already removed our entire emissions off the face of the planet, off of what we were exporting. In fact, 6.5%, considering we're between 1.7 and 2.1, depending on who you're looking at and which green is doing the GHG emission chart. But for the most part, we're 1.5, 1.67, 1.65% of the total GHG emissions. We could have removed more than 3 times that already. And that's taking into account the 4 to 6 years needed to build those pipelines. And Energy East would have been almost complete, which would have, we could have reduced probably close to 7% of the world's total emissions, as well as us having a zero footprint. So for all you liberal greeners, you're causing more harm on the planet every day than you could ever do with a battery. There are steps. We're not ready for it. Right now, we should be concentrating on what we can do, not somebody's daydream, using our tax dollars. So for all you up north, Manitoba and Saskatchewan, you're holding yourselves back into poverty. Quit holding the Indigenous back. Let them take ownership of their lives. Quit letting the media talk you into, especially the whites around who think, oh, this is social injustice to the Indigenous and we're going to protest. You're 99% of the problem. Get out of the Indigenous' way. Let them explode with the ingenuity and culture they have. We need to stop suppressing it. We need to let them move forward. Now I'm going to show you a clip that's going to blow your minds.
Quebec, for centuries, has been a minority, a linguistic minority, cultural, economic minority, but they did something different. They had an or else added to the end of it. How far are you willing to go? Are you willing to say, we want these things or else? At what stage would you, for example, invoke the Clarity Act as clarified by the Supreme Court? For example, calling a referendum on the Clarity Act question of secession. Do you have an or else in mind? What is it, and what would make you use it? And if not, how are you serious? And I'll start off with Danielle Smith on that one.
Ezra, he's a real journalist. Ask the right questions. This is why I support him and his Rebel News outlet. They do their job. They don't care if it's a conservative or a liberal. Put them on the spot and ask them the right questions.
The or else is Dennis Modry and the Alberta Prosperity Project. It's true. We proclaimed into law on April the 7th the Citizen Initiative Act, which gives the people the power to collect signatures for a petition campaign to propose an amendment. If it's a simple matter of policy, it's a 10% threshold. If it's a constitutional change, it's a 20% threshold. That would mean 600,000 signatures. And as I understand it, Dr. Modry has 1 million people on his database. So part of when I decided I wanted to run, I knew how important it was to make sure that we addressed the issues of autonomy. And I talked to Dr. Modry as one of my first steps. I said, let's try this together. Let's get as much autonomy as we can. Full well knowing that he's got the power, you've got the power. If we're not successful, and this is why I take your movement very, very seriously, and why Justin Trudeau should take it very, very seriously too, because you have the power to be able to be the or else.
Now this is the one I am going to promote. So if you live in Alberta, and you're part of the Alberta Republican Party or the Alberta 51st Party and the other, like I said earlier, numerous ones, don't divide your own chance at prosperity, at independence. Don't fight and allow somebody to say, well, I've got all the right ideas, and this is what we're going to do, and you got to be part of my club, and no, we can't have that club. That club's bad. They don't want what we want. Well, they want the same thing. They want independence, but they're doing it wrong. You want to support me. Enough. Enough. You need to come together. You can still keep your little clubs. You can still keep your organizations where you're comfortable with. Just make sure you're aware of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Because she's right. This was filmed during the leadership race. This is why she won. Because she's correct. Before we just jump and abandon ship, let's try the unity. Let's try to keep Canada together. Because she knew as a country, the promise of what Canada could become by sharing the wealth of Alberta with the rest of the Canada would allow the entire nation to become the most powerful, well-respected, and free country in the world. And Quebec has been purposefully, with the help of the Laurentian elite and that little 3% geographic control they have over all of Canada, to stop Canada from being that state. to have that wealth. They still taking blood oil. Russian oil is still making it to the shores of Canada. I've exposed this in previous episodes. We need to end this. And in doing so, we create jobs, very good paying jobs, generational jobs, all across Canada. We remove the uber rich and bolster the middle class, which means more money for infrastructure, better schools, better hospitals, faster home building. The whole economy will do. It's amazing how it would just explode the nation's wealth. This is what the people who are the funders of the Liberal Party, the backers of Carney and his investors and the Brookfield, don't want. They like being the high and mighty. This is why they have crushed our middle class, because they make billions of dollars of profit from doing it. And think about the whole heating oil out east. Yes, out east, I'm talking to you. Wouldn't it be nice to be getting natural gas at 700 and some % less than what you're paying now and have cleaner, more efficient energy? Wouldn't it be nice to know that when the school buses are filling up with gas, you're not supporting a regime in a third world country who persecutes, maims, kills? Instead, you're helping your neighbor to get ahead. You're helping the province beside you to get ahead. You're uniting the entire nation. This is the dream that Danielle Smiths has. She doesn't want Alberta to leave. She knew way ahead of the power that the Independence Party had already. And she's been trying everything possible to get Canada to wake up. And then you get people like Dougie, I'm going to cut your power off, and then goes down and gets his pee-pee whacked. And causes huge strain. Ontario, you have no idea of the pain and suffering you've done, especially the red voters out there on this last election. Again, previous episodes on the auto industry. Alberta's done. Saskatchewan's done. Here's an article that just dropped. Assembly will consider West's options, including independence-orientated proposals, says Manning. A political titan in Western Canada is vying to examine all options for the region's future, including independent-orientated proposals after Monday's federal election result. It's part of Preston Manning's plan to hope for the best but prepare for the worst after the federal Liberals secured a fourth consecutive term in power. Polling is currently being done to ascertain whether the election of yet another Liberal government has increased the growing estrangement of Western Canada from Ottawa and the rest of Canada, the founder of the defunct Reform Party said in a statement released on Tuesday. He did not provide any further details on efforts to gauge the public opinion on the issue, such as who is funding the project. Trust me, they have over 1 million people involved. There's funding. Throughout the campaign, the former leader of the federal opposition warned a Liberal win could trigger a wave of Western alienation, going so far as to call Liberal leader Mark Carney a threat to national unity in a Globe and Mail op-ed. Now, the media has been trying to make this into some little it's just a few people. They won't take it seriously. Knowing full well how serious they were. This is going down, people. This is happening right now. And like I said, today's show is just on Alberta. Saskatchewan is on board and has a higher percentage of people that want out. Northern BC is eager to see Alberta leave so they can start their own process and have a place to join. That gives 100% access to the West Shore. Goodbye, BC. If you guys really think you can live without Alberta, you are living in fairy tale land. It ain't gonna happen. And if Saskatchewan jumps on board with them, the grain belt, who has the largest uranium, purest uranium on the planet, all your nuclear power plants, who do you think is going to be making oodles of money when you pull the tax burden off the shoulders of the provinces? Goodbye, Chinese tariffs, because you're not Canada no more. You're not a sellout government looking out for a singular industry and holding the entire nation hostage and forcing the entire nation into poverty because of a small industry. Canada's going to collapse. The Liberals have fulfilled what Trump wanted, and they were too daft, and the media too involved with the Liberal Party to tell Canadians the truth. This is why Trump said he'd rather deal with a Liberal. This is why Trump has been helping the Liberals get elected. A weaker nation gives it a lot more credibility for Trump to be Caesar and say, look what I did. I expanded our borders. But it won't be Alberta. It won't be Saskatchewan. And it won't be Northern BC. There's a lot of people who are from the East Coast that are saying, well, we want to do the same thing. Good luck. Good luck. More than 50% of your base are card-holding red Liberals who don't care. And like I've stated on earlier episodes, you could put a little wee mustache and get them to raise their arm as a leader. They don't care. Because to them, they are a Liberal, born, raised. Their kids will be like their grandparents were and their great-grandparents were. And screw the rest of Canada, screw everything. These people are the demise to Canada. They have held Canada back for generations. And the new Liberal Party is taking full advantage of their naivety. Now, on to a few more really interesting clips I want to show you. This is Chris Scott. For those of you who don't know him, he owns the Whistle Stop Cafe. He has a huge fan base. Huge fan base. I've used him a few times on some of my episodes. He's brilliant. He's a great businessman. He really, truly in his heart believes in democracy and freedom, and has been putting himself in harm's way from the federal government for years. Listen to him, and maybe
ever since I opened my restaurant against the restrictions and ran into the issues that I've been dealing with over the past couple years, I've been looking for solutions, like a real solution, not just a temporary force a judge to throw your stuff out of court solution, but a lasting solution that other people can apply to their lives and can literally make the world better for other people. And I've heard it all. I've heard everything from, oh man, I've heard it all. There's all sorts of groups that have ideas on what we can do to be successful in getting our rights and freedoms or keeping them. None of them have any solutions that are lasting. The only one that does is the Alberta Prosperity Project. And that's because at the end of the day, the only people that are going to save us when our freedoms are threatened is us. That's it. I spent too much time wondering about what politician was going to step up and save me, or who was going to step up and do something to save me. And the whole time, the answer was staring me right in the face every time I brushed my teeth. It was me. And it's us. And the minute we stand up as Albertans and we say, we're not going to live like this, we're not going to put up with cancel culture and wokeness and critical race theory and all of these ideologies that they twist the truth and celebrate lies. Albertans don't want to do that. And that's the reason why I speak and advocate for the Alberta Prosperity Project, because the solutions they're offering, they're plausible, they're probable, they're lawful, they're peaceful, and nobody's left behind. It's not a left or a right thing. This is a freedom-loving Albertans or not. So that's, yeah, in a nutshell, that's it.
So if you're from Alberta and you're watching this and you're part of a different group, and like right now they're bolstering this whole Republican of Alberta or whatever, whatever. If a referendum comes out, these are the people you want to be part of. Not to say that the Republican won't maybe show it and you'll be voting on the same plebiscite or the same referendum, but if you want to take and be serious with a lot, I mean, these people, you heard it from Danielle Smith. There's over 1 million people involved in this already. That's the numbers you want to be part of. Now, I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this that are part of the separatist movement are already part of this Alberta Prosperity Movement. But those of you who aren't, that are a part of a different page or a group, this is where you want to be. I'm going to post their webpage, their link. And on my TikTok, I will actually put a picture up so that you can just take a screenshot and it'll take you right to the page. This movement is happening, and it's happening fast. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And if you are, punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. And I always urge, especially if you're new, scroll through, check out some of my previous videos. And a lot of times what's in the title isn't the entirety of what I talk about or I show. And I always post all of my evidence and links in the description below. If you wish to donate, you can reach me at CanadianCitizenJournal@gmail.com. I don't make any money off this platform. I could use all the help that you can give me. And I know it's Canada. I know Canada, we're suffering. There's no money. We're broke. But every little bit can help. As well as these other social media outfits that I try to promote. We all need your help. The first and biggest thing you can do is to like, share, and subscribe. That helps grow the channel and it helps get the word out. Until next time, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm Alias to Guy. Stay informed.